Hey, are you sleepy? Yeah, you know what I'm about to ask. I think we can get through a couple more chapters of Stargirl if you want. Well, if you're not that tired, I think we could do quite a bit. How about I just start reading and you let me know when you're getting tired, okay? Besides, we're at a really good part. Yeah. Okay. Well, you comfy? Good. Let's see. We were on chapter 12. This is a good part. I'm glad we're jumping into something exciting. Okay. Chapter 12. This is how Hot Seat went. It took place in the Communications Center studio. There were 2 chairs on stage. The infamous hot seat itself, painted red with flames running up the legs, and an ordinary chair for the host, Kevin. Off the side, there were 2 rows of 6 chairs each, the second row higher than the first. This was where the jury sat. It was a jury in name only. The 12 members did not vote or render a verdict. Their job was to ask questions, to give the hot seat its heat. Ticklish questions, embarrassing questions, nosy questions. But not mean or hurtful questions. The idea was to make the subject squirm, not roast. In the spirit of mock inquisition, we called the subject the victim. And why would anyone want to be the victim? The lure of TV. The chance to confess or lie before a camera and before peers instead of parents. But I doubted the usual reasons applied to Stargirl. There were 3 cameras, one for the stage, one for the jury, and Chico. Chico was the handheld close-up camera. According to Mr. Robineau, our faculty supervisor, a student named Chico once begged him to be the close-up camera kid. Mr. Robineau gave him a tryout, but Chico was so skinny he practically collapsed under the camera. The job went to someone else, and Chico went to the weight room. By the following year, Chico had muscles, and the camera was like nothing on his shoulder. He got the job, and he was brilliant at it. He gave the camera his own name. "We are one," he said. When he graduated, his name stayed behind, and from then on the close-up camera and its operator were a unit called Chico. The host and the victim were each fitted with a thimble-sized clip-on mic. The jury passed around a hand mic. Opposite the stage was the glassed-in control room, sound-insulated from the rest of the studio. That's where I worked, wearing my headset, watching the monitors, directing the shots. I stood at the shoulder of the technical director, or TD. He sat at a rack of buttons, punching up the shots I ordered. Also in the control room were the graphics and audio people. Mr. Robineau was there as faculty overseer, but basically the students worked everything. Kevin's job was to get things started. Intro the victim, ask a few opening questions, stir things up if the jury was slow. Usually the jury was on the ball. Typical questions. Does it bother you that you're so short? Is it true that you like so-and-so? Do you wish you were good looking? How often do you take a shower? It almost always added up to entertainment. At the end of the half hour, we cued credits and music, and there was always a good feeling in the air. And everyone, victim, jury members, crew, mingled and became students again. We filmed the shows after school, then broadcast them that night, prime time, on local cable. About 10,000 homes. Our own survey said at least 50% of the student body watched any given show. We outdrew most of the hot sitcoms. We expected to top 90% for the Stargirl show. But I had a secret. I wished no one would watch. In the months since we had scheduled the show, Stargirl's popularity had dropped out of sight, gone with ukuleles from the lunchroom. More and more kids saw her cheerleading behavior as undermining the basketball team and its perfect record. I was afraid the booze for her might spread from the court to the studio. I was afraid the show might turn ugly. When Stargirl came in that day after school, Kevin gave her the usual briefing, while Mr. Robinow and I checked out the equipment. As the jury members straggled in, they were not clowning around or tap dancing on the stage as jurors usually did. They went right to their seats. Stargirl was the one tap dancing and mugging for the cameras with Cinnamon the rat licking her nose. Kevin was cracking up, but the faces of the jurors were grim. One of them was Hillary Kimball. My bad feeling got worse. Why did they let Hillary be a jury member? What the heck? I retreated to the control room and shut the door. I checked communications with cameras. We were ready. Kevin and Stargirl took their seats. I took one last look through the plate glass that separated the set from the control room. For the next half hour, I would see the world through 4 monitors. Okay, everybody, I announced, here we go. I cut the studio mic. I looked over my control room mates. We all set? Everyone nodded. Just then, Stargirl lifted one of Cinnamon's front paws and waved at the control room and, in a squeaky voice, said, "Hi, Leo." I froze. I came unraveled. I didn't know she knew my name. I just stood there like a dummy. Finally, I waggled my fingers at the rat and mouthed the words, "Hi, Cinnamon," although they couldn't hear me on the other side of the glass. I took a deep breath. Okay, ready music, ready intro? I paused. Music, intro. This was the moment I lived for. Launching this show. I was the director, the maestro. I called the shots. On the monitors before me, I watched the program unfold according to my commands. But on this day, the thrill was missing. I felt only a dark dread sneaking along the cables. Greetings and welcome to Hot Seat. Kevin went through the opening spiel. Kevin loved to be on camera. He was ideal for a show like this, which made good use of his smirky grin and arching, "Did I really hear you say that?" eyebrows. He turned to Stargirl. Then, impromptu, he reached out and stroked the nose of Cinnamon. He was perched on Stargirl's shoulder. "Wanna hold him?" she said. Kevin gave the camera a, "Should I?" look. "Sure," he said. "Ready? Chico, rat," I said into my headset mic. "Ready" was always the first command sequence. Chico zoomed in. Chico. TD punched up Chico. The camera followed Cinnamon from Stargirl's hands to Kevin's. No sooner was the rat in Kevin's lap than it scampered up his chest and darted between 2 buttons on his shirt. Kevin yipped and squirmed. "It scratches." "He has fingernails," Stargirl said calmly. "He won't hurt you." Chico nailed Cinnamon, poking his head out from behind the 2 buttons. Mr. Robinow stuck a thumbs up in front of my face. Kevin gave the camera his "ain't I saltin' face." He turned again to Stargirl. "You know, ever since you showed up at school this year, we've been wanting to put you on the hot seat." Stargirl stared at him. She turned to the live camera. Her eyes were growing wider. Something was happening. And wider. "Chico!" I barked. Chico moved in, crouching, giving it a little upshot. "Terrific. Closer, closer," I said. Stargirl's wonder-struck eyes practically filled the screen. I checked the long-shot monitor. She was frozen, rigid, as if electrified to the chair. Someone smacked my shoulder. I turned. Mr. Robinow was laughing, saying something. I lifted one earphone. "She's joking," he repeated. And suddenly I saw. She was taking hot seat, literally. She was milking it for all it was worth. And judging from the blank stares of Kevin and the jury, Mr. Robina and I were the only ones who got the joke. Stargirl's hands were rising now from the arms of the hot seat. "Ready, one?" I called. "One." Camera one, not there at first, but getting it now, the long shot, nailing her as her hands came off the chair arms, fingers spread wide. You could almost see her fingertips smoking. "Hold it," I prayed. "Hold it." As her horrified eyes swung down over the side of the chair, the hot seat saw the painted flames. Yikes. Her scream bent instrument dials like palms in a hurricane. The rat leaped from Kevin's shirt. The TV image quaked as my camera one man flinched, but he recovered and caught her standing now at the front edge of the stage, bending over with her rear end in the camera, flapping her hand behind her, fanning her smoking fanny. Finally, Kevin got it. He went nuts. "Your British friend told you what?" "Oh, no. Oh my God. No. Listen, when was this written?" 2000. Explains a lot. 1. Pull back. Get Kevin in it. Ready? 1. Kevin was doubled up, tipping out of his chair on his knees on the stage. His laughter flooded the control room. The rat ran over his hands and hopped down the single stage step. "The rat!" I yelled. "Two, get the rat!" But Two couldn't get the rat because the rat was nosing around Two's feet and Two was bolting from his camera. "Chico, rat." Chico dived. He was flat on the floor, feeding the live screen a brilliant shot of the rat headed over to the jury. The jury members scrambling, taking off, climbing onto their seats. Forget the readies. Things were happening too fast. The cameras were dancing, feeding the monitors. I barked commands. TD was punching his button rack like some hard rock keyboarder. Stargirl's pantomime remains the best I've ever seen. Mr. Robinow kept squeezing my shoulder. As he said later, it was the greatest moment in hot seat history. But because of what followed, no audience would ever see it. That scene always made me cringe as a child. In less than a minute, everything returned to normal. Stargirl retrieved Cinnamon and sat back coolly in the hot seat, as if nothing had happened. Kevin's eyes twinkled. He was squirming. He couldn't wait to dig into the interview. Neither could the jury, but their eyes were not twinkling. Kevin forced himself to look serious. "So your name? Stargirl. It's pretty unusual." Stargirl gave him a blank look. Kevin was flustered. "Isn't it?" he said. Stargirl shrugged. "Not to me." She's putting him on, I thought. "Chico," I said into my mic, stayed tight on her face. A voice was heard dimly off camera. Kevin turned. A jury member had spoken. "Jury, mic up," I said, "ready to?" The mic was passed to Jennifer St. John. 2. The mic looked like a black ice cream cone before Jennifer's face. Her voice wasn't pleasant. "What's wrong with the name your parents gave you?" Stargirl turned slowly to Jennifer. She smiled. "Nothing. It was a good name." "What was it?" "Susan." "So why did you drop it?" "Because I didn't feel like Susan anymore." "So you just threw out Susan and named yourself Stargirl?" "No." Still smiling. "No." "Pocket Mouse." 12 pairs of eyes boggled. "What?" "I named myself Pocket Mouse," Stargirl said breezily. "Then Mud Pie, then Holly Gully, then Stargirl." Damon Ritchie snatched the mic from Jennifer St. John. "So What's it gonna be next, dog turd? Uh-oh, I thought, here we go. Kevin jumped in. So you change your name whenever you get tired of it? Whenever it doesn't fit me anymore. I'm not my name. My name is something I wear, like a shirt. It gets worn, I outgrow it, I change it. So why Stargirl? I don't know. She petted Cinnamon's nose with her fingertips. There's been at least 3 past tense verbs that I'm just not sure about in this book. In the last chapter. Sorry. I was walking in the desert one night looking up at the sky, like... She chuckled. How can you not look at the sky? It just sort of came to me. Fell onto me. Kevin looked up from his sheet of prepared questions. So what do your parents think? Are they sad you didn't keep Susan? No. It was almost their idea. When I started calling myself Pocket Mouse when I was little, they called me that too. And we just never went back. Another distant voice from the jury. I tapped the sound man. Jury mic, and keep all mics open. I hated to do it. It was Mike Ebersole. I said, do you love your country? Yes, she answered briskly. Do you love yours? Ebersole ignored her question. Why don't you say the Pledge of Allegiance right? She smiled. Sounds right to me. Sounds like you're a traitor to me. Jurors were only supposed to ask questions, not make statements. A hand reached into the picture and grabbed the mic from Ebersole. Becca Rinaldi's angry face appeared on camera too. Why do you cheer for the other team? Stargirl seemed to be thinking it over. I guess because I'm a cheerleader. You're not just a cheerleader, you dumb cluck. Becca Rinaldi was snarling into the mic. You're supposed to be our cheerleader, a Micah cheerleader. I glanced at Mr. Robineau. He was turned away from the monitors. He was staring straight at the set through the control room window. Stargirl was leaning forward, looking earnestly at Becca Rinaldi, her voice small as a little girl's. When the other team scores a point, and you see how happy it makes all their fans, doesn't it make you happy too? Becca growled, no. Doesn't it make you want to join in? No. Don't you ever want the other team to be happy too? No. Stargirl seemed genuinely surprised. You don't always want to be the winner, do you? Becca scowled at her and jutted out her jaw. Yes. Yes, I do. Yes. I always want to be the winner. That's what I do. I root for us to win. That's what we all do. She swept her arm around the set. We root for Micah. She jabbed her finger at the stage. Who do you root for? Stargirl hesitated. She smiled, threw out her arms. I root for everybody. Kevin, to the rescue, thankfully, clapped his hands. Hey, how about this? Maybe it should be official. Maybe one person in the whole district should be appointed to be on, he waved his arm, everybody's side. Stargirl reached over and slapped Kevin's knee. She could wear every school's letter on her sweater. Kevin laughed. She'd have to be as big as a house. Stargirl slapped her own knee. Then no letter at all. That's even better. She looked into the camera. She swiped at the space before her. Out with the letters. Cheerleader at large. Everybody's cheerleader. Kevin sat at attention, placed his hand over his heart. With liberty and justice and a cheerleader for all. Ebersole snarled into the jury mic. And a nut roll for all. Kevin wagged his fingers. That's a no-no, he scolded. No statements from the jury, questions only. Renee Boseman snatched the mic. Okay, here's a question. Why did you quit homeschooling? This was the start of a period that blurs as I try to recall it. Incidents seem to cascade and merge. Events become feelings, feelings become events. Head and heart are contrary historians. A hot seat session was never aired. Mr. Robinaugh destroyed the tape. Of course, that didn't stop every moment from it being reported. In fact, most of the students knew about it by the time the school opened the next day. What I recall then, when the last detail had been spilled, is a period of whispers and waiting. Tension. What would happen now? Would the jury's open hostility spill over into the classrooms? How would Stargirl react? Answers were expected on the following day, Valentine's Day. On previous holidays, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Groundhog Day, Stargirl had left a little something on each desk of her homeroom. Would she do likewise this time? The answer was yes. Each member of homeroom 17 found a candy heart on his or her desk that morning. There was a basketball game that night. That I do remember. The biggest game of the year. The Electrons had breezed through the regular season undefeated, but now the second season was about to begin. The playoffs. First the districts, then the regionals, and finally the state tournament. We had never even made it to the districts, but now visions of championships dance in our heads. The Electrons. Champions of all Arizona. We would settle for nothing less. First hurdle in our way was the Sun Valley champions of the Pima League. The game was played Valentine's night on a neutral court in Casa Grande. All of Micah, it seemed, emptied out and headed for the game. Kevin and I went in the pickup. From the moment the Micah mob entered the gym, our cheers rattled the rafters. The big green M on Stargirl's white sweater flounced as she spun and leaped with the other cheerleaders. I spent as much time watching her as I did watching the game. She cheered when we scored. When Sun Valley scored, she did not. Something inside me felt better. But not for long. We were losing. For the first time all year, we were trailing at the end of the first quarter. In fact, we were getting smoked, 21-9. The reason was no mystery. While Sun Valley's team was not as good as ours, they did have one thing we did not. A superstar. A kid named Ron Kovac. He stood 6'8" and averaged 30 points per game. Our players looked like 5 Davids flailing against Goliath. Sun Valley's lead had increased to 19 points midway through the second quarter. Our once raucous fans were stunned into silence, and that's when it happened. The ball was loose in the middle of the floor. Several players from each team dived for it. At that moment, Kovac was running past, trying to avoid the divers, and his right foot came down on a prone player's sneaker. So it was told in the newspapers the next day. At the time, it happened so fast no one saw it, although several people said they heard a sickening crack, like a twig snapping. All we knew was that suddenly Goliath was on the floor writhing, screaming, and his right foot looked all wrong, and Sun Valley coaches and trainer and players were sprinting across the floor, but they weren't the first. Stargirl somehow was already there. While Kovac's own cheerleaders sat gaping and stricken on their bench, Stargirl knelt on the hardwood floor. She held his head in her lap while the others attended to his broken leg. Her hands moved over his face and forehead. She seemed to be saying things to him. When they carried him away on a stretcher, she followed. Everyone, both sides, stood and applauded. The Sun Valley cheerleaders leaped as if he had just scored 2 points. Ambulance lights flashed in the high windows. I knew why I was applauding, but I wondered about some of the other Micah fans. Were they really standing in tribute or because they were happy to see him go? The game resumed. Stargirl returned to the cheerleaders' bench. Without Kovac, Sun Valley was a pushover. By early in the second half, we took the lead and went on to win easily. 2 nights later, we lost to Glendale. Again, we fell farther and farther behind as the first half went on. But this time there was no turnaround in the second half. This time the Electrons faced not 1, but 5 players better than themselves. This time nobody broke an ankle, although I'm sure in our desperation, some of us secretly wished for it. We were shocked. We couldn't believe it. And then, as the seconds of the fourth quarter ticked by, we did believe. The cheers from across the gym were like volleys of arrows, piercing our grand delusion. How could we have been so stupid? Did we really think that little Micah, undefeated in its own third-rate league, could ever stand up to the big city powerhouses around the state? We had been lured into great, foolish expectations. Suckered. We were devastated. It had been so wonderful to be winners, and so right for us. Winning, we had come to believe, was our destiny. And now, as the Glendale coach sent in the scrubs to mop us up, Micah girls wept. Boys cursed and booed. Some blamed the officials or the nets or the lights. The cheerleaders, to their credit, kept on cheering. They looked up at us with glistening eyes and mascara tracks on their cheeks. They pumped their arms and shouted and did everything that cheerleaders are supposed to do. But their gestures were empty, their hearts not in it. Except for Stargirl. As I watched her intently, I could see that she was different. Her cheeks were dry. There was no crack in her voice, no sag in her shoulders. From the start of the second half, she never sat down. And she never again looked at the game. She turned her back on the court. She stood and faced us and gave not an ounce of herself to the jubilation across the gym. We were losing by 30 points with a minute to go, but she cheered on as if we had a chance. Her eyes blazed with a ferocity I'd never seen before. She shook her fists at us. She flung her defiance at our gloom. And then her face was bloody. A Glendale player had just dunked the ball, and Kevin pounded my knee with his fist, and I looked to see Stargirl's face, and suddenly a bloody mask, and I was on my feet screaming, "No." But it wasn't blood. It was a tomato. Someone had splattered her face with a perfectly thrown, ripe tomato. And as the clock expired and the Glendale fans poured onto the court, Stargirl just stood there, her great eyes staring up at us in utter bewilderment through the pulpy red gore. Spouts of bitter laughter erupted among us, even some applause. The next morning at home, I found the card. It was in a school notebook that apparently I had not opened for several days. It was a Valentine. One of those little cutout third-grade sorts, showing a blushing little boy and a girl with Mary Jane shoes and a big red heart between them and the words, "I love you." And as third graders, and high schoolers often do, the sender had signed it in code. Stargirl. Probably. That would be my guess. Are you sleepy? The next chapter is really short. You want to do it? Okay. We'll do this tiny chapter. She gave everybody at school a card. That was my first thought. When I saw Kevin at school, I was about to ask him, but I pulled back. I waited until lunch. I tried to be casual. I slipped it in with the only thing that mattered that day. The school was in mourning. The game. The loss. The tomato. Oh yeah, incidentally, Speaking of Stargirl, did you happen to get a card? He looked at me funny. She gave them to her homeroom, I heard. Yeah, I said. That's what I heard too, but was that all? Didn't she give them to everybody else? He shrugged. Not to me. Why? You get one? He was looking away across the lunchroom, biting into his sandwich, yet I felt he was grilling me. I shook my head. Oh, no. I was just wondering. Actually, I was sitting on the card. It was in the back pocket of my jeans. Meanwhile, all eyes in the lunchroom were on Stargirl. I think we half expected to see traces of red still clinging to her face. She sat at her usual table with Dory Dilson and several other friends. She seemed subdued. She did not play her ukulele. She did not play with her rat. She just ate and talked with the girls at her table. As the lunch period was ending, she got up but did not head straight for the exit. Instead, she detoured in the direction of my table. I panicked. I jumped up, grabbed my stuff, blurted, "Gotta go," left Kevin with his mouth hanging, and took off. Not fast enough. Halfway to the door, I heard her behind me. "Hi, Leo." My face got warm. I was sure every eye was turned to me. I was sure they could all see the card in my pocket. I pretended to look at the clock. I pretended I was late for something. I ran from the lunchroom. I lurked in the shadows for the rest of the day. I went straight home after school. I stayed in my room. I came out only for dinner. I told my parents I had a project to do. I paced. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I stared out the window. I laid the card on my study desk. I picked it up. I read it. I read it. I read it. I played "Hi, Leo" over and over in my head. I tossed darts with a corkboard on the back of my door. My father called in. "What's your project? Darts?" I went out. I drove around in the pickup. I drove down her street. At the last intersection before her house, I turned off. For hours, I lay under my sheet of moonlight. Her voice came through the night, from the light, from the stars. "Hi, Leo." In the morning, it was a Saturday, Kevin and I went together to Archie's for the weekly meeting of the Loyal Order of the Stone Bow. There were about 15 of us. We wore our fossil necklaces. Archie wanted to discuss the Eocene skull he was holding, but all the others could talk about was the game. When they told Archie about the tomato, his eyebrows went up, but other than that, his face did not change. I thought, this is not news to him, he already knows. Archie spent the whole session that way, nodding and smiling and raising his eyebrows. We dumped our disappointment on him, the devastation of the loss. He said very little. When it was over, he looked down at the skull in his lap, patted it, and said, "Well, this fellow here lost his game too. He was winning for 10 million years or so, but then the early grasses started growing up around him and he found himself in a different league. He hung in there as well as he could. He scored his points, but he kept falling farther and farther behind. The opposition was better, quicker, keener. In the championship game, our boy got annihilated. Not only did he not show up for class the next day, he never showed up, period. They never saw him again." Archie lifted the snouted, fox-sized skull until it was side by side with his own face. A good minute passed as he said nothing, inviting us to our own thoughts. Faces staring at faces, staring at faces. Tens of millions of years of faces in a living room in a place called Arizona. That was a weird end to the chapter. But I see you falling asleep. I don't want you to miss any of the story, so we can end that there. We're on chapter 16, okay? How many chapters are there? Let's see. 33. Ooh, no spoilers. Wow. About halfway there. Some of the chapters are longer and shorter than others, so You get some sleep. Thanks for reading with me. Good night. Sleep well.